Guy here, welcome to my podcast. As you can see, I'm actually, if you're watching this on video anyway, I'm stuck in my hotel room. Well, not stuck. I've chosen to burrow myself in here, quickly record this podcast and do the introduction to Sarah Grace, who is my phenomenal guest today. The reason why I'm in the hotel room is because you might know that I'm currently in Croatia as of recording this. We just finished our 5-day retreat a few days ago, and it was phenomenal. We had 60 people from all around the world pretty much coming together and really diving deep in this spiritual work that I'm so grateful that I'm able to pass the wisdom along. That certainly helped me on my journey today as well. With Sarah Grace, her story is phenomenal. The psychic paramedic, her journey, her experiences, and how she shares and articulates things is exceptional. I really enjoyed this conversation with Sarah. I really connected with her, and I'm so excited to share it with you today. If you are watching this on YouTube, be sure to let me know in the comments where you are in the world. If you enjoy my podcast, a simple subscribe or hitting a like goes a long way. And also, more importantly, share these conversations with a loved one or friend that you feel could use these conversations well, because together this is how these conversations continue to get out there. And it was amazing. I've met so many people that listen to my podcast here in Europe. I even had somebody stop me in the hotel the other week just randomly, which was wow, incredible. On that note, if you're listening to this in Australia, our Australian retreat has sold out in January, and there's quite a substantial waiting list. Clearly, the momentum that we're doing is continuing to get out there, which just warms my heart. We are running a retreat in Bali in end of April 2025. That is about 1/3 full already, and I'd imagine that sells out. So hopefully I get to meet you in person one day. Come and join us. All the links are below, no matter which one you're listening to. And yeah, I'll see you soon. Enjoy this podcast with Sarah. It's phenomenal. Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Guy. Thank you so much for having me.
If you were at an intimate dinner party and sat next to a stranger and they asked you, what do you do for a living? How would you respond?
Wow, that's quite the question. Psychic paramedic turned holistic first responder. And we can totally get into what that means.
How is the response to that? Because I've actually had one other person on that was a ER doctor and has gone into this line of work. It feels unusual, but maybe it's not from your end.
Well, it's opening. Let's put it that way. When I was beginning my career as a paramedic in California was some 20, 25 years ago. And there was still a lot more stigma and a lot less crossover between holistic than there is now. And so fortunately, I myself have been out kind of talking openly and publicly about how I used my empathic and intuitive abilities in critical settings. And I know personally a lot of nurses and physicians as well. So it's not uncommon, and people are just now starting to speak out more.
How long was you a paramedic for, and when did you decide to leave?
So I was paramedic in California's busiest systems for 15 years. All in, I did 20 years total of 911 because I did some chaplaincy work over COVID. But my experience, if we just go all the way back, was I grew up in the middle of nowhere in a tiny town on a reservation in South Dakota before internet. So there was no like Googling, there was no outside connection. And it was a very violent and turbulent upbringing, a lot of chaos. And one day when I was 7, I woke up and I could just see colors around people. That's how it started for me. And I'm just a little kid. I don't know any different. So I'm just thinking this is what it is. And over the course of several weeks and months, the sensitivities, quote, gifts came on more and more. So from seeing auric fields to feeling people's feelings to knowing their intentions and thoughts to seeing diseases in people's bodies up to seeing spirits. And I was very confused. Didn't say anything for a while until I finally said something to a family member. And unfortunately, I was shamed and condemned, and they told me, don't say anything about that. We'll send you to a loony bin. So here I think there's something wrong with me as a result of being so sensitive. And I just didn't understand why I was like this if other people weren't like this, because I just was a kid and I just wanted to fit in like
Mhm.
anybody. That began my personal odyssey because at that moment I contracted and had a lot of shame and fear. And I couldn't make the stimulus go away. I didn't want it. And that coupled with a very unstable household, I was just kind of left out there, trying to figure it out for myself. And that led me down uh, a dark path for a while with addiction and trying to like cope and get a sense of understanding as to why I am the way that I am. Fast forward after a near death experience and an overdose when I was 20, I decided to get myself together, clean my life up, and challenge all of the old beliefs. So I eventually became a paramedic, and the rest is history.
Wow.
Use these, yeah.
Yeah. So rewinding it back, during that time through from, I guess, 7 to 20 then, growing up and wanting
Mhm.
to suppress whatever gifts were actually showing to you, were they visible all the time? Like, was it apparent in everyday life, or was it that the fact that you had to use whatever your addiction was it alcohol, drugs, or whatever it might be, to suppress those feelings so you didn't feel those?
My experience, yes, is it's always on. And so my experience, my strength is clairvoyance, so seeing. So forever, always to this day, I can see auric fields and tracers and, like the thoughts and feeling the feelings. It's a full sensory immersion for me,
Wow.
24/7, 360. And I've heard other people talk about being able to turn it on and off. That's not my personal experience, though. Now I'm educated and I understand like why I am this way and how I can use these abilities to help people. So it's how I choose to pay attention or not pay attention. And so I used drugs and alcohol to suppress, and that was dealing with a lot of my own personal shame, thinking there was something really wrong with me, and then I just wanted a break from the stimulus. And so I used drugs and alcohol back then for that reason, but it's not conducive to health, in life, So ultimately, I had a choice point and chose to get clean and move
Wow.
on.
So I would just want to ask before we go, because I'd love to dive into your near death experience in a moment. But like when you say you see colors and awareness, because I'm fascinated by these things, because when we actually hold retreats, as the energy moves, I can clearly start to tune into the field and start to see from a different vantage point. But as that energy drops and comes back home, it's not there constantly, if that makes sense. And I'm fascinated, like if you're on a conversation with me right now, could you see my auric field? And so you see that naturally with every person that you speak to, and it's just there, but you tune into obviously me and the conversation and you're just aware of it.
Yeah,
Wow.
correct. Yeah, it can be really overstimulating, as you can imagine, in crowds or when like going to the grocery store or like a box store where there's like, it's just there's so much sensory input that it hits my nervous system in such a way that I used to get really overstimulated. I couldn't understand, or I did not know at the time how to separate what was mine from other people's. And as I've become empowered and done my own healing work, that's been one of the number one things that I've learned to do is to not only separate, but then, yeah, I'm aware and I'm watching people and you have gold, you have purple, emerald green, cobalt blue, like beautiful auric field. And I'm aware of people's energies and things, but I'm not like scanning them. Because when people are like, oh, you can see me and they get all nervous. And I'm like, no, I'm all 2D man. I'm not looking at you.
Of course. And how much, let's say you are working with a client and someone that is generally there for self-inquiry, how much information does that auric field give you to tell you about a situation or a person or what's going on?
Oh my gosh, well, so much because the, true intentions are readily available in the auric field, meaning what the person's actually feeling, what they're actually thinking, what their motive actually is. And so they can be saying one thing with
Okay.
words, but I'm like, "Oh, yeah, yeah. What about bat, right?" And my specialty now is I've moved from, I did paramedic forever and I used my abilities in critical settings. And we could talk about, what I saw. It was pretty incredible. Now I do full-time medical intuition and psychic surgery and in my practice. And so I do a lot of body-based stuff and help people come back into health, right? Overcome disease, addiction, trauma, and step into their own gifts. But it's in the field as well as in the physical body because everything is
Mhm.
interconnected.
Yeah, and we only address the
Mhm.
physical. And how much would you say then that energetic trauma, that psychic trauma, you said you're doing energetic surgery with people as well, is actually affecting the physical from your experience?
Well, to me, it's hand in glove. So that's why I work a little bit differently. And because the
Hmm.
paramedic background, I'm so
Yeah.
practical. And to me, if it's not going to land in this reality, like, and help us feel better and help us figure out how to like function as people and like, then what's the point? And so the way that I work is I hit it from every single angle, meaning physiology, right? We have to deal with like what's happening physiologically with the body, as well as mentally, emotionally, energetically, spiritually. So hitting it from every layer, and then that way the person can feel equipped. Like they're like, oh, it's not just this, right? It's not just this disease. It's like, well, actually, that's coming from blah,
Mm.
blah, 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 blah. That happened when you were 17 and this happened, and then how it's all interconnected. And so, yeah, I hope
Yeah,
that
no,
answers that
beautiful. I
question.
find the whole topic, well, fascinating, clearly, because that's why I have a podcast, so I could talk to people like yourself. Um, can we move into your near-death experience then before your paramedic days? Because clearly that must have had a impact on you. What happened at the point? Did you actually clinically die, or did you just have an experience from an overdose where you left the body?
And consciousness expansion, I left my body from an overdose. And my experience was I was way off the rails. My mom had just died. I was abusing drugs and alcohol and like I was just in a really bad way. And I was not stoked on life. I was not into live. I was like, yeah, no, I'm good. There's just too much stimulus all the time. And then coming out of the violence and chaos, so I had the experience of the overdose, and for me, it was consciousness expansion, floating up and out of the body. I went into like a really yummy kind of a honey-like energy with a lot of mandalas and fractals. And I felt no pain. I felt love. I felt like this overwhelming sense of peace. And coming from where I had just been, I was like, oh, thank God. You know, but I heard a voice, a female voice, which may have been my higher consciousness. It could have been a guide. It could have been an ancestor. It's like I knew her, but I didn't know her. So it was some people ask, well, who was it? Everything is essentially one when we expand beyond the consciousness of this dualistic paradigm. And so I was there and I heard this female voice and she said it much more, eloquently than I'm going to, but she was like, "We get it's been hard, but you're not done." And I was like, "Oh, what? No, I'm good. I'm good." And so essentially there was an affirmation of you incarnated with these abilities for a reason. And if you choose to go back, you're actually going to help a lot of people with it. And there was a choice point where if I didn't choose prior to a certain moment, then I would not have been able to come back. But I was like, okay, like, I guess, I'll come back. Obviously, I came back. And the funny thing is when you're in the expanded state of consciousness, everything makes sense simultaneously. And you're kind of like in this unity consciousness bliss experience. And I was thinking like, yeah, I'll go back. And I was thinking that I would just know, how to get from point A to point B. But when I came back into my body, there was no like bullet point on, okay, this is how you pull yourself out of where you are now and get yourself cleaned up and use your gifts. I was the person who had to do the work, right? And my work was really coming to terms with the shame, the fear, everything that I had been told and internalized was wrong, quote, about me. And I had to start to challenge that. And more importantly, I had to decide for myself that nobody was coming to save me, that I was going to have to do that for myself. And I had literally just died and chosen to come back. And so that's when I started my healing
Wow.
journey.
And did you share with anyone that experience at the time, or was that just another thing you kept to yourself along with all your
That was the thing at the
wow.
time that I kept to myself because I was just like, I was already scared to say anything about the voices and the colors and the spirits and the blah, 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 because I didn't want to be judged. And now it's fun because collectively the consciousness has shifted so much that we can have these conversations and it's far more normalized than it was all those years ago.
Absolutely. And just reflecting back, and I'm thinking of the listeners as well, and you spoke about those experiences and then having your healing journey began. Where do you start? Where did you start on that healing journey? What did that look like for you?
Well, I had hit bottom and, you know, everyone's different, but usually we humans are pretty darn stubborn and we'll like push it until we just can't anymore. And so a lot of times we bottom out, right? And I had to just get real with myself. I was like, this sucks. I don't like this. But what I'm doing is not working. And I had this sense of wanting somebody else to come do it for me. Like I had this sense of injustice or my heart life has been hard for all of these reasons, right? And so therefore I'm entitled to or I should have. And that those were my biggest hangups because none of that is true. It's up to me as the individual to heal myself. So I had to get sick of my own BS and really start to call myself out and be like, yeah, those things happened to you when you were little and that sucks. And you're the person that's continued by doing all of these things. So what do you want to do with it now? And so as I stopped making excuses and I just hit a point where I could not continue physically in the way that I was going, it was really all about the willingness to take full responsibility for my entire life. And that's not taking responsibility for the abuse that I had been through, but that is taking responsibility for the behaviors that I contributed to after the fact as I was growing up and going through adolescence. And once I stopped looking outside and waiting for somebody else to come do it for me, and then I went most invasive to least invasive. I had a lot of addictions that I needed to kick. And so I went from like the biggest ones that were gonna like kill me, all the way down to the least invasive. And that's everybody's up to something today in today's culture, even if they're just addicted to productivity or
Mhm.
busyness or schooling or sugar. It doesn't have to be crack or math. Everybody's doing something. And it's a willingness to really be accountable and check ourselves, because sometimes we let ourselves kind of slide. Oh, it's not that bad, right? But ultimately, the willingness to be like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And what am I willing to do? So I pulled myself into seclusion and I wrote on a piece of paper like all of the addictions that I needed to quit and alcohol and smoking cigarettes and all cocaine and meth and all the things that I had to come off of. And one by one, over the course of a couple of months, I was kicking all of those until I got myself clean. And then I relocated out of the area that was not supportive of me and kind of started a new life. And then I did some other more fun things in my early 20s with like pinup modeling and working in the Hollywood industry and all of those things. And then I kind of started to have more of a sense of self that eventually led me. Every time an ambulance would go by, I'd have that intuition like, you should be doing that. But I was really scared of it. And finally, I was like, okay, I'll just do it. And so I went to the UCLA EMT program, and then I started in South Central Los Angeles in 911, and that was 15 years.
Wow. Wow. And I just want to highlight the key
Mhm.
is willingness, isn't it? It really is the first step to creating change in our lives. And I really want to lean into your your paramedic journey as well. But I just feel I just have to ask you, with all those experiences that you had up until that point and led you through, reflecting back, do you feel that as a soul that we actually negotiate and choose our circumstances and experiences to grow, or do you feel they are random or somewhere in between?
I believe that we choose an incarnation path with certain specific trajectories and experiences. And I also think that our little human minds, we want to put things in boxes and make
Mhm.
things like, oh, this is how this goes. Whereas my experience in my own healing journey with my overdose and with the different, shamanic experiences that I've had, when we go out into universal consciousness, it's so big and so vast, it's almost incomprehensible, right? So I would say it's a little bit of both. Mostly we choose it. And at the same time, there's also figuring in karmic programs that are coming from, different lineages, ancestral programs. There's all different kinds of
Yeah.
factors at play. That said, like looking back, it's like bricks and mortar now I see. It's like, oh my gosh, like because it was so extremely violent for me
Mm.
growing up that I took to the 911 system like a duck to water, like the most stressful, extreme, conditions of the human experience. I was like, yeah, I got this, no problem. And so I saw how going through what I went through lent me to being a better paramedic, a really good paramedic, and then being a really good paramedic lent me to becoming a really good healer, right? Because I don't judge anything. I'm like, dude, I've been there. I totally get it, and we're all doing the best that we can. So looking back, in no way, shape, or form do I have any sense of like victimization or I shouldn't have been through or this is unfair or any of it
Wow.
anymore.
That's quite a healing journey. So when you became a paramedic, and were you developing your gifts at the same time, or were they just naturally at the forefront? Or were they still like squashing up to one side?
I wish that's what always so closeted still. I was so scared of him. So my intuition's pushing me right here. I was running around being a model and doing all this stuff, but I just kind of had that sense like this is really superficial. This isn't like it for me. And I had this knowing I needed to be on the ambulance, but I was scared. And what happened was you have to understand first responder world, it's all very, very alpha dog, like very male dominated, very alpha dog. So I didn't want to be the weird girl who sees dead people. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm around all these SWAT dudes. like I'm like, dang it, why can't I just fit in somewhere? But my experience was, the first 6 months or so was relatively calm with my abilities. I think that was a reprieve to get me comfortable in the mechanics of a 911 call because there are a lot of moving parts on a critical call. And then ultimately what happened was my experience became very much like Matrix. So I became the paramedic who was always there for like the worst calls. And I think that's Dharma and, energetics. But I was always there when people were dying. And so I became almost like a midwife
Wow.
in that experience. I saw it enough times. At first, I resisted, but it was so omnipresent, it was so obvious to me because I could watch the chakra systems release from the base of the spine. I'd watch the soul exit out the crown of the head. We'd start CPR. I'd watch their loved ones come in. I'd watch them leave. I knew the second they crossed. Or on trauma calls, there was always angels. Like, you got gunshots or school shootings or car accidents or whatever. And there would be celestial angels that would come to kind of assist the calming and crossing of the people that had just died traumatically. So I watched this over and over and over and over. And then instead of fighting it, I started to really question, why am I like this? Obviously, this is helpful, because I knew what was going to happen before it did on calls. That comes in handy, and being able to like really communicate with the people as they were transitioning. It was just actually a really beautiful, it was like being a midwife. It was really beautiful. And that began my personal, really where I was finally willing to be like, okay, I'm like this. I don't know why I'm like this. Maybe I should get educated.
Wow.
So at first I was quiet and closeted. By the end of my 15 years, people around me knew because they could feel that something was happening. And they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know. There's just this energy, you know?
Incredible. I almost feel like wanted to tap into there must have been some stories or things that you could share during that time that, like, let's say somebody crossed over. Could they then see that you could see them at the,
Oh, yeah. You can see the entire time that I could see them because, again, as we are shedding the body, it's like taking off a heavy coat. And one of my main messages nowadays is that there's nothing to fear in death. Death is as normal as birth, and there's as many ways to die as there are to live. So instead of fearing death, how about you live your life? Right. And in those moments of death, it's like taking off a heavy coat. Well, the person feels like the same. They feel like themselves, but lighter. Right. And they're looking around like, what's going on here? Why is my body in that car? Right. So I could see them and they could see that I could see them and I could communicate telepathically. So over the course of my career, I developed kind of a protocol of like, you're in a car accident, you're dead. We're going to extricate your body. We're going to start CPR. This is what's happening. Boom, 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 boom. And I would be doing, telepathically communicating while doing CPR, while starting IVs, while, defibrillating and doing what needed to be
wow.
done.
F- Have you, anyone ever left their body, you communicated, but then come back?
I mean, not all of them died. And there was a couple of rare occasions that were actually very challenging for me to witness, where they were literally clawing to try to get back in their body and they were dead. It wasn't gonna happen. And so that was really hard for me to watch. Typically in the moments of, because there's stages and things that happen to the physical body in death. I mean, of course, incineration or decapitation or things like this are going to be different. But like for the standard death, it's like the respirations kick out and then the person does this little guppy breathing and then eventually the heartbeat slows and stops. And while that's happening, there's this little spider web silver cord that comes out of the sternum. And then the soul is like floating. That's what we hear near death experiences. They're floating up in the corner of the room. And they're usually still tethered until like the heartbeat ceases. And then they'll go through whatever their transition experience is.
Wow. While we're on the subject of death, and what do you believe happens once that point of death and there's no return? Like the process, where do we ascend back to, like, and the process of that? Like, is there life review? I mean, I've had many people speak about that experience on this podcast. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Oh, my personal experience and what I've seen countless people experience and go through, it's a bit of stages, right? So first, say it's a medical death. It's a cancer or an end stage hospice or it's an expected whatever. Usually it's like a family reunion, right? There may be pets and loved ones from this incarnation cycle and they can go hang out there. If it's a trauma, usually again, they're celestials. The person may actually have to be put in these, like, it's almost like being put in an incubator until their soul can coalesce and come to terms enough with the fact that they're dead. And then they go to their family and friends. Additionally, if the person had strong religious beliefs, there's oftentimes religious archetypes. And so they're kind of in this like, you know, reunion party, for lack of a better way of saying it. And they're there for a while. And then my understanding is they go to life review. And everybody's like, well, how long? So are they in life review for 2 weeks? It's like, no, you guys, it's not how long. It's true. Because again, there's the time space continuum doesn't align with this dualistic paradigm once we're in the expanded transcendent state. And so life review can last as long as it does. And my personal understanding of that is what an education, because we're seeing not only every thought, feeling, behavior, choice that we had, but how it manifested and hit and other people reacted, other people's experiences as a result of our choices and the butterfly effect we watch until the entire thing plays out. And that can be really, really positive or really, really negative and, and challenging to witness, depending on the soul's cycle and incarnation. From there into it gets a little bit more expressed because we're living thousands of parallel lives simultaneously. And there's what's called an oversoul, which looks kind of like a nerve cell. It's got like an axon and dendrite. And we have all of this data and information coming from thousands of your simultaneous experiences into this incarnation, or I'm sorry, into the oversoul, and there into Kashyyyks. And then we get into things that just don't really make sense to the
That's
brain.
yeah, that's a great explanation. Thank you. I always, like think about myself as a nerve end into consciousness, and there's this exchange of information, and think, okay, what can I learn today from this? Where's the growth here? And it certainly helped me
Yeah.
through some challenging times. It's interesting you say that. I've been trying to, like, because I have 2 young children, so it's very challenging for me. But there's a show on iTunes called Dark Matter. I don't know if you've looked at it, but it's of the very concept of multiple realities all happening at the same time. And it's mind bending when you start to consider that could be happening here and now. That's for sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so big, man. I mean, trillions of dimensions happening simultaneously, you know? And I get it because we as humans, we want to feel like we're important and we matter and we're in control and we know what's going on. And so we think that Earth is where we keep incarnating to. And it's like, yeah, that's cute. We do. And there's all this other stuff happening, Yeah, it's
Just on
pretty
that
cool.
as well, and do you believe like a past life? Because we always thinking in linear terms all the time, because that's how we're
There's
working with time in the 3-dimensional reality. But yet a past life is actually happening now as one of those nerve endings from the oversoul,
They're
all parallel.
yeah, they're parallel. Yeah, because nobody ever talks about their future lives. They only talk about their past lives, right? And it's like, again, it's not, it's all happening now, which is not something that, again, we just want to put
Mm.
stuff in boxes and make it make sense so that we feel safe and we can control. And that's part of the human nature paradigm. It's okay to be like that. And, the more spiritual experiences we have or awakening experiences we have, we hold this reality, or I'll speak for myself, I hold this reality a little bit looser in the way of like, I've had such transcendental unity consciousness experiences, and I've done a lot of shamanic journeys and plant medicine journeys and my own healing journeys. So I've done a lot of traveling around out there. And so that's where I just come back here and I'm like, what do I want to do with my day? And then, well, what are we going to do it today in my little human body,
Yeah.
you know?
And what would you say to people as well? Because people are so, I feel at this time, everything's talking about ascension, everything is talking about out there, but nobody's talking about being so much grounded here and rooted into, we have this gift called life, and to fully experience this. And it's
Mhm.
an easy trap. I mean, I certainly fell into it for a while. Like, I've got to get out there. I've got to start ascending, when actually it's like, no, everything I have
Yes.
is here within me right here, right now. And the gifts are here.
We're totally down and in. That's really what I learned from my own personal journey is the more willing I am to be down in my body and in my humanity, the more powerful access I've been given to my abilities. So in order to ascend, if you will, my experience is to go down and in. And let's not forget that we are for always, and take this or leave this, whatever resonates to you, of course, but for my experiences for always, we are unity consciousness having this tiny little fragmented human experience. Like we came here for just like a blip. And for us to be trying to get back to what we always were is bypassing or missing the point of the human experience, which is experience, life, just having. And so I see that oftentimes I fell into that in my initial stages of my healing because I was getting into the spiritual community and was like, oh, it's out there. And then I was like, wait a second, this doesn't add up because we're always that. So what about
Mhm.
this? Right. And what I do now is just like really helping people. And I think that like the more we can just make it make sense and land in this reality of like, dude, I get it. So you've been struggling with this addiction or your, family's jacked up in that way, or you're having financial issues or your kids or whatever. It's like the real realness of humanity and the challenges that we face in our daily lives. How do we work with that? How do we integrate that? And then what are all the ways that we can heal? And that's really what I'm
Yeah,
up to now.
beautiful. I'd love to ask you as well, during that period when you became a paramedic, you said you decided to start to really develop the skills. So I have two questions for
Mhm.
you. One is, how did you do that? Because I'm curious as well. And two, do we all have these abilities, or some people kind of born into it like Michael Jordan? You're just more gifted and are going to be the Michael Jordan of basketball, or of this kind of work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I think we are all wired and we're all energetic beings having a human physiologic experience. We've got the senses, the standard senses, the ego, the mind, gravity, duality. These are the things that comprise the human dimension. That said, there are ways that we can hack the system to, activate the pineal gland and open up the crown chakra and, clear out the physical vessels so that you have more light energy coming in and are able to attune to those subtle things. And I think there's people that, like you said, it's like everybody's gifted in their own sections. And some people like are the way that they are. So how did I do it? I started with one, I had to accept. Accept it. Oh my gosh, that took me so long. Once I accepted, I was like, fine, where do I start? For me, I just started with basic guided meditation and I started learning about basic energy healing through Reiki. And so push, pull, stop, energy, very gentle. Then I went into mediumship, medical intuition. A lot of my own personal healing journeys came from shamanic journeys, both through the drums and rattles and some well-known teachers in addition to plant medicine work. And from there, I mean, I've just kind of done all of these different Kundalini yoga, like all of these different, experiences. And each of those would provide different information for me to learn how to work with my gifts and my abilities. So if somebody's just starting out, what I advocate is just stop distracting, accept that, you're like how you are and where you are. And then look at maybe if you're feeling everything and it's very overwhelming and you have gut health issues and hormone issues as a result, or depression or bipolar or like whatever, GI issues present as a result of feeling so much, learn about being an empath, learn about, clairsentience and figure out all the ways to clear your field and clear your body. So least invasive or most invasive to least invasive. So if you feel, mostly start there. If you see, mostly start there. If you hear or just know, or if you see dead people, like learn about each of those skills and then figure out how you want to ground your energy and really attune the physical vessel. So we don't have to, I don't subscribe to being vegan or being this way or that way. Each individual, it's going to be unique to them. Everybody's body is a little bit different in what they need. And there's things that we know we as humans need: water, sunshine, breath, movement, like community, connection. And, so start to like really get a handle on the physical things. My experience took me it took me a long time to where I got comfortable enough, the sensitivities and with kind of my understanding of what this is. I don't subscribe to woo woo. I'm super practical and grounded. And I just had to come to terms with the fact that I don't speak or like a lot of the spiritual people, and that's okay. Like I'm me and I can be like the way that I am, which is like really grounded and still very much paramedic, right? So how do I want to work with these abilities? And so if somebody is listening to this and they're like, I don't know where to start, or I don't know, my abilities aren't like her abilities. And like, it's not about any of that. It's about where you are, being willing to lean in and stay open to exploring and the universe will start to unfold the path as you take steps.
Beautiful, beautiful. Do you feel the more we look after our body, our vessel, the more we actually love it and eat like we love ourselves, move like we love ourselves, and do these acts from this place, the more we will then connect to our divine self?
100%. 100%. Yeah, when I was treating myself poorly, I was having a lot of emotional eradicacy. I couldn't ground my energy. I was having constant bombardment and overstimulation. The more willing I've been to, work out and drink water and like move my body and things, be still, not always be doing something, but just be present, then the more my gifts and abilities have opened. And very important to say, there's no one transcendental experience that you have where you're like, that's it. I'm here. I've done it. Because my experience is like you'll go and have some awakening experience or some spiritual experience, and then you go back and you still gotta clean the cat box and pay your bills, right? We still got kids and loans and stuff, you know what I'm saying? Like how do we do this? And so it's learning both has been my experience, and being willing to be like, oh, I had this incredible Kundalini activation this past week at a breathwork ceremony. Okay, well, now I'm over here doing this. And one isn't better than the other. We like to think like the spiritual stuff is, quote, better, but it's not. And if we're thinking that, then we're still caught in the illusion of the duality, because everything is just what it is. Everything is God, like everything, even McDonald's and math, right? And so it's just finding that space and the grace for yourself wherever you are today, pulling back your personal power, being willing to take responsibility for yourself, your choices, your actions, regardless of what's happened to you in the past, and then lean into your gifts and your genius, which will look different than mine and different than yours, Guy. But that's what makes the
Mm.
tapestry, right? Everybody's got something amazing and unique. And the willingness to like lean into those things and the courage to live your life, right? Just live, you guys, please. None of us know when our last moment will be. So every single day I would run a call in the morning. Somebody got dressed, had their coffee and their cereal, they're driving to work and they got T-boned and that was it. Like every day, And so live your lives.
Wow. Yeah. Makes me emotional thinking about that. One last question I want to ask you before we kind of go into the end of the podcast is on trauma, because clearly you had a traumatic upbringing. And from my experience with trauma, it's held in the body. And it wasn't until I became aware enough and present enough to sit with it that it started to move. I mean, what is your thoughts on trauma, how it affects us, and how do you work with it generally?
I agree with what you're saying in the way that it lives in the body and the cells. And regardless of what we do to like cover or distract, it'll always just be lurking, right? And then it'll manifest as a panic attack at the worst moment. Like it'll throw out our back or whatever. And we're like, dang it. So the invitation is to lean in, to heal, to have the courage, to understand shadow work, to understand that we've always got the choice to how do we want to hold it? Do we want to be open to learning from and growing from and finding wisdom from what was really traumatic to us? There's also many, many ways and paths into healing: breath work, yoga, dance, ecstatic dance, Epsom salt baths, myofascial release. I love trauma release exercises. There's rage release exercises, there's binaural audio, EMDR, and then we get all the way up to the big guns of plant medicine work, which can be beautiful. But please, I always, always, always advocate appropriate dose, setting, and most importantly, integration. There's a lot of people pouring medicine out there. Right now, it's kind of the hip and trendy thing to do. And so do your research and only do medicine work if you get a really solid yes, okay, personally. And make sure that the heavy focus is always on integration with the people that you're going to do a ceremony with. So there's there's all kinds of amazing tools out there to deal with trauma now. And I'm a living example that we can come from really, really dark, really, really violent experiences and alchemize that into wisdom. I'm here to bridge the mainstream with the energetic and holistic community and help millions of people understand their own power and energetic capacity and giftedness. That's what I'm here to do, man.
Beautiful. Are you still working with one-on-ones and people it's written? You
I
do?
do. It's so fun. Yeah. So people can find me at sarahkgrace.com, and that's Sarah with an H, kgrace.com. So I do one-on-one sessions, and it's been really amazing because I've got clients worldwide now and really helping people again. It's like I'm still very much the paramedic. It's like pull you out of the ditch, overhaul and triage your entire life, pressure wash you, get you all stabilized, and then up and on your way with a protocol so that you feel like you understand what to do next. Additionally, I have an online community called the Grace Place, and we've got people from all over the world that are energetically sensitive and on their healing journey, overcoming trauma and addiction. And so you can find all this information, plus my book, which is going to be a TV
No
show.
way.
Yeah, there's that. It's in contract, so we're working
Oh,
towards
that's
that right now.
exciting. And what's your book called?
So Journey into Grace, Tales of a Psychic Paramedic. You can find it on
Wow, you've been busy,
Amazon.
haven't you? That's fantastic.
Busy, busy girl. We got things to do.
I
Yeah.
just last question, and for the podcast is: with everything we've covered today, what would you like to leave the listeners to ponder on?
Again, just live. Please, please live. Like, burn the nice candles, use the good cutlery, take the trip. The money will come. Take the trip. Live your life. Have the piece of pizza, man. Right? Like, let yourself experience life because it is 100% guaranteed to end at some point. Live it.
Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and thank you for all you do. I really enjoyed our conversation today, and it's been lovely getting to know you. And thank you for being so open about it and caring. Much appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Guy. Much love to everyone
Thank you.
listening. It's our time.
Absolutely.
Much.